Before we get started, I have a quick favor. I've been self-funding the Finding Genius podcast for 5 years now. I've done over 3,000 episodes. And as you can see on YouTube, we're up over 1 million views on the channel, which is fantastic. The next thing I really want to push on is to get up to 10,000 subscribers. Because once we do, we'll be able to put a donate button and we'll be able to solicit donations to help keep the podcast running and to also get the Finding Genius Foundation moving along. We have a big project studying anxiety, depression, and PTSD and working on a product to help people overcome these problems because I've seen them explode recently after the last 2 years of the whole virus situation. So if you would, please subscribe to the podcast. That would help us tremendously. Give us a thumbs up and check in the description for Buy Me a Coffee. It's about $5. If you could buy me a coffee, I'd really appreciate it. It would help keep the channel going, and I love coffee. Thank you.
Forget frequently asked questions,
common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
go above and beyond.
They become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
with Richard Jacobs.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius podcast. My guest today is Lewis O'Connor. We're going to talk about the geopolitical battles that go on for strategic metals and how this impacts global markets. Lewis is the founder and principal of Strategic Metals Investment, or Invest. So we're going to talk about, again, these metals. What are they? Gallium, germanium, etc. This is turning into a big deal geopolitically because these metals are used in a lot of manufacturing processes. I'm sure I'm not aware of most of them even, but so anyway, welcome, Lewis. Thanks for coming.
Rich, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, tell me a bit about your background and how you got interested in various metals and commodities, and then we'll look at present day.
Okay, so I suppose I'll take you back. I'll go back to about 2015, 2017 maybe, and I read an article actually about. I'm based in Europe, but I've lived in Central Europe and the Americas. But at this time, I was in Central America actually, and I read an article about that. Well, this had happened just a couple of years before, but the price of what we call rare earth metals had sort of tripled and went 3x and 5x in the space of a few months, And the reason it happened was there was a dispute between China and Japan over, actually a territorial dispute, and the Japanese detained or kidnapped a captain of a trawler, Chinese fishing trawler. And in retaliation, China restricted the export of these rare earths to Japan, and the prices went up. And it really caught my attention because I thought, how can one country sort of trigger, something like this? It was a geopolitical situation. It wasn't because of a shortage and so I just started to do a bit of research, and I eventually then found this company in Europe who, these raw materials are pretty much now the backbone of manufacturing in the 21st century. I mean, call them strategic metals, but that's an umbrella term for defense metals, energy transition metals, technology metals, space exploration, aviation, you name it. They're critically needed in these industries. And as I found out, China pretty much has a monopoly or an unrivaled dominance in this particular market. And it's funny now, that's 10 years ago, but just like this year alone, they're being mentioned almost daily now in the news and stuff. So that was initially, I wanted to find out, is there a way I didn't like the idea of investing in a mine. I wanted to know, how could I physically own and store and hold these raw materials? And so eventually I did find the right people, and I've become a partner with them now.
What materials are you talking about? I don't think you're storing depleted uranium or anything, but what kind of metals would even be safe to store that are used in manufacture?
Yeah, they're absolutely actually pretty much very, very safe. Now, some of them have to be stored under certain conditions, but what they are, the best way to give you context, Rich, would be the U.S. Geological Survey lists 45, maybe 50 metals that are strategic to the U.S. or North America, let's say, well, all countries. They're strategic or critical, if you will, to an economic prosperity and military capability. So they're absolutely essential. So we offer those, on the industry side, but we have narrowed down at any given day, there's about 8 or 10 that are, you could call like a subset that are really strategic for private investment. And what makes the list, how come a metal gets on our list? Well, look, we look for which ones are the least in production. Hafnium would be one, rhenium another 40 to 50 tons a year. So we look for which ones are actually the rarest, which ones are the most in demand, where is there supply or heavy supply concentration risk, and which ones have the most applications or provide the most diversification. So we're looking for the raw materials that you could say the upstream raw materials that ultimately become trillions of dollars in downstream GDP. And right now, they would be 5 technology metals: gallium, germanium, indium, hafnium, rhenium, and then some rare earth: dysprosium, neodymium, praseodymium, and terbium. That's just a few to give you an idea. They are hugely in demand. Like, for example, AI, artificial intelligence, runs on data, but it relies on rare earths for, the magnets and the cooling systems to power these, the servers.
Okay. So you guys will actually, let's say hafnium, I mean, what does it go for, like per ounce or per gram? And do you guys buy up a stake of it and sit on it, or what do you do?
No, what I did is I partnered with, and this is probably the most important thing I'll say, throughout the 30 minutes, in terms of safety, security, which is I found a company in Central Europe, in Frankfurt, in Germany, who their core business is they buy and sell these metals. So they, they're 85% of their business activities are they're buying directly from producers, and they resell to manufacturers, Apple and Tesla, BMW, Siemens, any of these manufacturers, technology companies. So luckily, that's their core business, and that's what they do very well. However, they also have the largest logistics and distribution platform for these metals outside of China. And so they have access to maybe over 4,000 clients in 74 different countries. So that's their core business. However, they have a little side business, and that's where I came in. Is when I met them in 2020, they had a few, they were inviting private investors as well to participate. And I became their first partner outside the sort of German-speaking region of Europe. So I'm based in Ireland, UK, but actually, funny enough, 80% of my clients are coming from the US. So they have outsourced the sales and marketing to private investors to a limited number of partners like myself. So, it's not like I'm just a guy that has this sales and marketing idea with no access to the industry. That wouldn't work. That'd be red flags everywhere because, industrial grade materials, need to be handled by the right people. They need to be stored in the right place, and you need access to liquidate them. They're the only end buyer or manufacturer. So when people purchase through us, they're actually buying from a globally recognized dealer, being stored in a facility it's a REACH certified facility, which basically means it's regulated, it's licensed to store all types of industrial materials, including metals and oxide, nitrate, liquid form, whatever it might be. And then finally, they also have a practice of buying the metals and reselling them to industry buyers when our clients are ready to sell.
Okay. So you work with groups like this, so you don't actually touch most of the metals. You're just facilitating the buying, selling, storing, and all that.
Exactly. And you can be happy to hear that I don't have anything to do with it, because, chain of custody is hugely important. And, a lot of these materials, say, come from China. Gallium, for example, comes in 10 kg or 25 kg barrels. And even our clients, like our clients that own these metals, those raw materials they own, they're still in the original packaging from the producer. And they'll always remain that way, because no industry buyer, whether that's Tesla or Apple or a small thermometer manufacturer, they won't buy these raw materials unless the chain of custody is intact 100%. There's no, these could end up in the end, an F-35.
It's like a collector buying the first Spider-Man, unless it's in perfect condition, they don't want it.
Exactly.
Well, do you guys keep them in mint condition, I guess is what I'll call it, so that they can be resold to anyone?
Exactly. Oh, yeah. Look, unless you're a hobbyist, you wouldn't come to us if you were a hobbyist anyway, because you wouldn't want to buy the amounts we sell. But yeah, in a lot of cases, metals can be stored almost indefinitely. However, the oxides, which are the powdered form, they require certain conditions. But yeah, they're extremely liquid raw materials. So we keep them it's basically a distribution platform. We supply manufacturers all over the world from there. So, as I said, we've about 50 people in the office in Frankfurt working on the industry side. And again, that if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't safely be able to invite private investors to participate.
Have you I mean, so you're doing this for investors then? It's an investment play for everybody?
Well, yeah, my specific area is private. I work with just private investors. I suppose what I'm saying is there's three facets to the business. There's the industry, there's the storage, and then why I'm talking to you here today is we invite private investors to buy these metals, store them, and, make some money. I mean, believe it or not, and people, I don't expect people to believe me now, but they can believe that I believe it and they can find this out for themselves. None of our private investors has lost money if they've held them for a minimum of 3 years. We recommend 3 to 5 years, 5 years even better. And, historically people make money.
What's, I don't know, I know every investment is different in all the caveats, but what are some examples of some nice wins that you guys have had?
So in the last 5 years, for example, when we went into lockdown, terbium, which is a critical material for computer chips, for semiconductors. When we went into lockdown, there was a massive surge in demand for, laptops. Everybody was going to work from home. So anything connected to working from home. And because there's a sort of an inflexibility, or I suppose an inelasticity supply, when demand increases, supply just can't keep up. So terbium went up 500% in 3 years. Now, it's since corrected. But then when we came out of lockdown, hafnium went up 250% in about 18 months. Hafnium is a super alloy in jet engines and rods for nuclear reactors, jet space technology or rocket engines as well. It's got this ability to withstand, to perform under extremely high temperatures. So it's not substitutable in jet engines. So what happened is when we came out of lockdown, Boeing, Airbus, they're all putting in orders. In aviation industry came back alive again. Same thing, inflexibility to supply, demand surge. Took a while, about 18 months for that to correct. And in the meantime, and now recently, just since April the 4th, when President Trump announced the tariffs, China counter-measured with tariffs, but also what a lot of people didn't see is they restricted 7 rare earths, and those prices have gone up quite a bit. I'd say they're double what they were in April, in some cases more than that. So you have these, what we call scarcity-driven price hikes or increases, and that's where, something I should mention as well, Richard, the manufacturers call these metals the spice metals, which is a very good description of them. So they're only used in small concentration. So for example, there's 12 of them in every smartphone. There's 12 or 13 semiconductors in every smartphone, but there might only be 0.01% of indium in that phone. There might be only 0.02% of neodymium. Now, neodymium is in the tiny little magnet in the speaker, but that same neodymium is in magnets, wind turbines, and electric cars. Now, here's the kicker. When the prices for these raw materials go up, the manufacturers just absorb the price because they make up they only represent a small makeup of the overall product. So it's far more sort of catastrophic for, production of the iPhone to shut down than it is for the manufacturer to pay a 50% increase. So there's a sort of quite a few hidden dynamics behind it.
Oh, but actually, I was thinking, so the black market in these materials, it would be difficult because everyone wants to know the provenance of them. But is there a black market for them? And who buy? I guess I don't know who would buy them in the black market.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. There was, say going back to the 80s and the 90s, there was quite a few rogue mines, if you will, operating out of China and stuff. And China has really, really, really cleaned up the industry. I mean, they've taken it over, so they've also cleaned it up. There can still be, I think, a bit of smuggling going on, but very little comparison to what it used to be. But also, like you said, the U.S. Department of Defense are not going to buy from Joe Soap, who calls them up and says, they only deal with recognized suppliers with full chain of custody. People like ourselves, I mean, we're in business on the industry side, the German side, we're in business 25 years. So we're a tier 1 supplier to quite a few blue chip companies,
Well, if, I don't know, let's say, I'm just making this up. Let's say neodymium was like $10,000 a gram. Why wouldn't someone go to like a wind farm and rip the neodymium out of the windmills and then try to sell it so they can get enough material together?
It wouldn't be the brightest criminal in the world to be trying that. I mean, number one, how are you going to get up? You're going to knock down a wind turbine, and how are you going to recover the materials? And, that just wouldn't, you'd be better off robbing banks or, I don't know, something easier.
Wouldn't be better on the battlefield if drones use certain metals, let's say, and there's like thousands and thousands and thousands of them, laying all over the place. I would think that there would be scavenging of this,
That's very good point. And funny you mentioned that, but the company I work with, can't say too much, but they are testing exactly that for germanium. At the moment, there's a very big shortage of germanium. It's a defense metal, and they've sent off waste, if you will, just like you said, from military usage to South Korea, and it's being recovered and remetallized. And at the moment, it's looking quite positive. If they can get it to a certain purity level. So it's funny you just thought of that now. I think they only just thought of that 25 years ago. So we might have to ask you if any other idea.
That's funny. Well, I figured, again, once something gets valuable enough, it starts to become worth it to salvage it wherever you can, to steal it, to do whatever, So that's the big way. What are some of the most valuable metals that you've seen? What are the prices approximately?
They can all sort of spike when there's I'll just tell you why as well, why there's an inflexibility. So there isn't a mine for gallium or germanium. So these rare earths, they're always a byproduct of another raw material. So they don't occur naturally in abundance in the Earth's crust. So one example, hafnium is a byproduct of zirconium mining. Gallium's a byproduct of aluminum. So for every 50 tons of zirconium, you'll only get 1 ton of hafnium. So they're also very chemically similar. So they have to be extracted, separated, and then remetallized. And that's a very messy, complicated process. And basically what Europe and the US allowed happen in the last 30 years is we exported our pollution and this mining to China. We thought back in, the days when globalization was such a good idea, we thought, well, look, we just let China do this. They'll do it for less money. It's messy, and we'll just buy the raw materials, cheaply from them. Now that has now sort of backfired because it's just not a good idea. You've probably noticed yourself, it's practically been in the news nearly every day this year, which is the US, Europe, are all trying to wean this dependence from China. But these raw materials, they're hard to get. There's not many of them. And at the moment, China's about a generation ahead and $1 trillion investment ahead of everybody else.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize how much.
Yeah, I suppose we're heading into an era of what we might call resource nationalism. That's why President Trump, talked about rare earth minerals in Ukraine. And of course, make no mistake, when he's talking about Greenland, he's not talking about, the ski resorts or the resources below that. So we're heading into this I suppose you could say we're going from globalization to de-globalization, where, these supply chain, all countries need these raw materials and cannot just be reliant. At the moment, we're relying on China. That won't change for a long time, but China has a very strong card when it comes to rare earth.
We were trying to restrict, the high-end chip to China, but this is their counterblow. If we won't give them chips and technology, then they can say no rare earth.
That's exactly
so everyone gets crippled in a way.
That's what's happening right now since April the 4th. You're 100% correct. Since about 2018, from the first Trump administration, the US, as well as the most advanced, best computer chips in the world are coming from Taiwan and South Korea. About 82% from the Taiwanese semiconductor manufacturing company. Now, since about 2018, we've been restricting the technology, the technology for the best chips. And in retaliation, China says, okay, well, we'll withhold the raw material you need for them. That's exactly what's happening now in real time with dysprosium, terbium, and germanium. And that's why you've seen in the last sort of 6 weeks a flurry of meetings between China and America in Geneva, in America. And I believe they're meeting again, or they already met again, maybe this week. So it's the one bit of leverage China really has. If just recently, if you look, the CEO of Ford Motor Company said, if we don't get rare earths, we've only 3 or 4 months supply. If this continues, this announcement from April the 4th, we'll be shutting down production. No question.
What about other nations? Let's say some nation that is not doing so well. I don't know, the Congo, let's say coltan or I don't know, I don't know if there's any rare earths, let's say besides that there. Why don't they take an extra step and finish and not just sell the raw, unprocessed material so they can gain more money for their country and they could have a significant point of leverage in the global trade of metals? There's got to be other countries that have stuff too, even if it's just one rare earth.
Correct. You're right. No, you're 100% correct. Yeah, we're seeing that. For example, look at China, for example. China has about 50% of the world's reserves, but they're also they're the largest importer as well. They've very good relations with their neighbors, or loyalty at least, for raw materials. So they're getting the ores from Myanmar and Laos now. So we are beginning to see cooperation between other nations. But for example, I think Canada exports just about all of its germanium to America. But if you look at how, America, if you will, the administration anyway, is treating its neighbors compared to how China is, it's not looking very good for cooperation, So you're right about that. But, another thing as well is China has about 29 universities graduating degrees in metallurgy and geology. About 400,000. I'd say China have been graduating about 200 metallurgists every week for the last 30 years. The US has about 100,000 people working in mining, and half of those will retire by about 2030, and nobody is studying metallurgy. So it's just not that simple. Like, I don't know if you know this, but despite the name, rare earths are not that rare. There's about 500,000 abandoned coal mines in America with tailings, and there's rare earths there. But America doesn't have either the human or the engineering expertise or the human capital. If they get all those materials at the moment, they'd have to sell them all to China for processing, because there is not one facility in the US that can process those raw materials. Now that's coming. MP, I don't know if you're familiar, MP Materials in California, the US Department of Defense just invested less than a week ago, 2 weeks ago, it made the news, and they've become their biggest shareholder. And MP are also building a facility, I think in Texas, might be very close to being finished, so maybe already in testing. So we're getting to the point where there will be sort of, America will move up the value chain. Until quite recently, MP Materials in California had to sell all their raw materials to China because they had no way to process them. Now that's going to change, but I'm quite sure, I don't want to say I'm 100% correct, but I'm pretty sure I heard the CEO of MP Materials in America say even when they get this processing facility up and running, it'll only represent about 1% of the overall demand in the US. So they need literally hundreds more of these facilities.
Jeez, that's crazy. And it takes years, I'm sure, to build them out with permitting and just the engineering and all that and the building.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as I said, the expertise doesn't at the moment exist either in Europe or the US. Now, I'm pretty sure they'll do it, no question, but it's just going to take some time. And in the meantime, that's why, we invite in private as I said, our private investors, if they hold, for that 3 to 5 year period, will make money.
What's the minimum that someone needs to invest? And how can they find out more about this?
So minimum investment is only $10,000. They can come to their website, strategicmetalsinvest.com, or if somebody emails me, Louis, Louis, at strategicmetalsinvest.com and mentions Rich Jacobs, then, we'll take good care of them.
Well, I appreciate it. Again, I know these probably are outliers, but what are some of the returns that some of these metals have seen over the past 3 to 5 years?
So I'd say the average, if we recommend people diversify, and be invested nearly in all, in modern technology, in aviation, in defense, in AI, in energy transition. So, that'd be about 8 or 10 metals there. And if you bought, say, all 8 or 10 we offer 5 years ago, the average would be about 34% a year of gains. However, there's a sort of an even better story there as well, which is during that period, terbium went up 500%. So if you own an asset and it's gone up 500%, we recommend, we'll tell people to sell it. They might sell all of some of it, hastium. So again, what we recommend is be aligned. One thing people need to know about us, Rich, is we're not, we only know metals. We don't do anything else. We don't have any other offers. We're not financial advisors, but we do know metals. And we say to people in a very frank and sincere way, say, look, please don't buy these metals unless you're aligned with our strategy. And we tell them what the strategy is, which is be diversified, be willing to hold for 3 to 5 years, and everybody will walk away happy.
You have a metal index fund that people can buy into? It may not be a formal fund, but...
No, it's a physical, like our clients physically own the asset. Just same paradigm as owning gold or silver. So they're actually...
They don't take home delivery, hopefully, right?
No, they go good if they, but we wouldn't recommend it. It'll cost them money, transportation, maybe taxes. But to be honest, if somebody I've clients from all over the world, and I've had 1 or 2 prospective clients from the US who didn't buy because they didn't, wanted to take delivery. And we almost talked them out of it then, because we don't want uncomfortable situations with private investors. So let's say somebody, wants to ship, into Texas, right? Gallium. They buy 100,000 from us. They pay us, then they pay to ship it, and it arrives at customs in Houston. And the customs agent will look at it and go, okay, this metal has civilian and military applications. Who's this person? What do they want it for? Then they'll call up the client and he says, oh no, it's just an investment. So we don't want that because, U.S. customs might not even allow them to take delivery. They might say, there's no way, this is on a critical list and it's,
Right.
We don't want that stuff. We'd rather they didn't buy than, have a problem later on. It's just not worth it for anybody involved,
Okay. Well, very good. So people should go to strategicmetalsinvest.com.
That's it.
Okay. And they could, you can create a coupon code or whatever it is if they heard you on Finding Genius. So it's very good. Well, Louis, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Reach. A pleasure.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.